The language of generational curses. Welcome back. I am Adeline, 11 times published author, and this is the Generational Curses series. Every field of knowledge has its own language. Medicine has clinical terms, law has legal vocabulary, and even sports have specialized words. Overstanding generational curses begins with overstanding the language used to describe them. These terms are not decorative. They define the framework of how curses operate and how they differ from ordinary struggles. Why language matters. Language shapes perception. If you call something bad luck, you minimize its systemic nature. If you call it a curse, you acknowledge that it has structure, continuity, and influence beyond one moment or one person. The words we use frame the problem, and the frame determines how seriously we take it and how we approach its resolution. Key terms and their meanings. Bloodline. The term bloodline refers to the direct genetic and ancestral line that connects you to those who came before you. It includes parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on, extending back through generations. Bloodline is more than biology. It is a conduit for stories, behaviors, traditions, traumas, and imprints that shape identity and expectation. When we talk about breaking a generational curse, we are referring to dismantling patterns encoded in this bloodline. Example: if every generation of a family experiences premature death from heart disease, that pattern is tied to the bloodline. Addressing it requires more than lifestyle changes. It requires awareness of the family's biological and behavioral history. Lineage. While bloodline refers to biology, lineage encompasses the heritage and legacy associated with that line. It includes values, cultural identity, and the narrative passed down through generations. Lineage answers questions like, what did this family believe about success? How did they define morality? What was their relationship to power, money, and love? Generational curses often embed themselves in the lineage as unspoken truths. For instance, if a family endured generations of betrayal, the lineage may carry the belief that trust is dangerous. That belief silently directs choices and perpetuates dysfunction. Inheritance. Most people associate inheritance with material wealth, money, property, possessions. In reality, inheritance is far broader. It includes emotional tendencies, behavioral patterns, relational dynamics, and spiritual conditions transmitted through family history. When you inherit a curse, you receive a pattern rather than a property. This pattern influences thought, emotion, and decision-making, even when you are unaware of its origin. Example: a family that endured historical displacement may pass down scarcity thinking. Descendants may hoard resources, fear investment, or sabotage financial opportunities without recognizing these actions as inherited. Patterns. A pattern is a recurring arrangement of actions, attitudes, or outcomes that repeat predictably over time. Patterns provide evidence of continuity. One isolated incident does not form a pattern. Repetition does. In the context of generational curses, patterns are the visible footprints of the curse. They show up in marriage breakdowns in multiple generations, repeated financial collapse despite changing circumstances, cycles of addiction, abuse, or illness. Recognizing patterns is the first diagnostic tool for identifying a generational curse. Cycles. While a pattern is a repeated structure, a cycle implies movement through stages that return to the same starting point. Cycles in family systems often follow this rhythm: initial crisis, financial ruin, relational breakdown, addiction. Temporary recovery or improvement. Return to crisis through a different expression. A family may experience economic hardship, then rise to stability, only to fall back into poverty through overspending or poor financial stewardship. The names and faces change, but the cycle continues. Bondage. The term bondage conveys the restrictive nature of a generational curse. It is not simply a habit you can break with willpower. It functions like a binding force that resists individual effort. Bondage creates a sense of inevitability. People trapped in it often feel as though their attempts to change are sabotaged by forces beyond control. This is why overstanding and addressing bondage requires more than behavioral adjustments. It requires breaking the structure that holds the pattern in place. How these terms interconnect bloodline is the biological and genetic line. Lineage is the cultural and narrative dimension tied to that line. Inheritance includes tangible and intangible elements, both property and patterns. Patterns are the evidence of repeated behaviors or outcomes. Cycles show the systemic rhythm of those patterns over time. Bondage describes the restrictive force that keeps the cycle active despite resistance. When combined, these terms form a map. Bloodline carries lineage, which transmits inheritance. Inheritance expresses itself through patterns and cycles, reinforced by bondage. Breaking a generational curse requires addressing each of these dimensions. Why a generational curse is not a bad habit. Many people confuse curses with bad habits. While habits are important, they operate at an individual level. They emerge from personal choice and respond to consistent effort. A curse, on the other hand, is a systemic structure that operates across time and space. It does not originate with one person, nor does it end with one person's willpower. Breaking a curse requires disrupting multiple layers: behavioral, psychological, biological, spiritual, and energetic. Key differences. Scope. A habit belongs to an individual. A curse belongs to a bloodline. Duration. A habit ends when a person changes behavior. A curse persists across generations unless confronted. Resistance. A habit responds to discipline and repetition. A curse resists change because it is reinforced by ancestral history and systemic energy. Impact. A habit influences one life. A curse influences dozens, sometimes hundreds, of lives connected by bloodline. Illustrative example. Imagine two people struggling with alcohol. Person A develops a drinking habit in college due to stress. After seeking therapy and support, they stop drinking permanently. Person B belongs to a family where every generation battled addiction in some form: alcohol, drugs, gambling. Even after rehab, Person B feels a gravitational pull toward self-destructive behavior. Their children begin showing signs of similar tendencies despite growing up in a stable home. The first case reflects a habit. The second reflects a generational curse. The difference is scale, depth, and persistence. Why precision in language? Empowers change. Clarity is power. When you mislabel a curse as a bad habit, you underestimate its strength and oversimplify its solution. When you identify it accurately, you can design a strategy that addresses its full complexity. Language does not only describe reality, it shapes it. Naming a pattern for what it truly is marks the first step toward transformation. Summary of key points. Bloodline, lineage, inheritance, patterns, cycles, and bondage form the vocabulary of generational curses. A curse differs from a bad habit in scope, duration, resistance, and impact. Precise language leads to precise solutions. Hi, I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and what you just watched is part of my signature program, the Chosen One series inside School of Soul. This series is not just a course, it's a blueprint for those who know they were different from the start: the black sheep, the scapegoat, the truth teller, the cycle breaker. Inside, you'll discover the family roles playbook, the golden child, the scapegoat, the enabler, the lost child, and how to finally step out of the part you were cast in without consent. How the black sheep becomes the goat, turning rejection into radical transformation in leadership. How to break generational curses and rewrite ancestral contracts so the pain stops with you. And how to recognize and escape modern forms of spiritual and technological targeting, from gang stalking to synthetic synchronicity. This isn't just about survival. It's about awakening, about reclaiming your voice, your lineage, and your destiny as one of the chosen ones. Click the link below to access the full series now, because the role ends the moment you decide it does, and the real script begins with you.